everybody, to Between the Shadows. This is Kara, and I'm here with my very special co-host, as always, Kristen Pierce.
Hello.
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us for another episode.
This is episode 40, y'all.
Yes, it is.
Episode 40.
It sure is.
So first and foremost, thank you so much for joining us. We are so excited to have you as always. We always appreciate you guys more than anything. Y'all keep this podcast alive. We keep Dark Shadows alive together.
Yes.
And that is what this is all about, y'all. So just as a reminder, all of you have heard about the Remembrance Weekend in July, over July 5th and 6th.
Mm-hmm. We're pretty much just weeks away now, guys.
We are just weeks away, and I am getting so excited. And
yeah.
Honestly, cannot wait. Kara and I are going to be there, and waiting for the magnets to ship that we will have while we are there, guys.
Just to pass out to all you,
just to pass
all you
out.
Friends and fans.
Yeah.
And just a little something for you guys.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're there, and just come find us. We would love to chat with you. We would love to just chat Dark Shadows and just just smooze. It's we've done all this on the internet. It would be so nice to see some faces and put some names to some faces.
Yeah.
We know that Miss Penny Dreadful is going to. Can't wait to meet her in person.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to meet Patrick McRae in person. Can't wait to meet Ansel Farage in person. You guys, it's going to be such a good time, and celebrating Lara Parker and Jonathan Frid and all of these actors. Who have come to gather and just celebrate Dark Shadows. It's going to be such a good time.
Yeah.
And so we really hope to see you there. And just one other item of business. We did mention last time, we did set up a fund page for the podcast. It's Buy Me a Coffee / Between the Shadows. I will leave a link in the notes for you guys. If anybody feels led, it just helps us offset the podcast costs and helps us keep this going. So if you feel led, we would ever appreciate it, but no pressure as always. But on with the show.
Tonight we're gonna be covering episodes 606 to 621.
Yes.
And this is basically, the bulk of it is pretty much Joe's downward spiral.
Yeah. Because we remember from when we closed out the last episode, Barnabas has now become Angelique's victim.
Yeah, and the focus is not on Joe anymore, so...
And Joe has a really difficult time handling it. There are some other things that go on.
Yeah.
But this is a lot of what we talk about in this episode. So just stay with us, and here we go.
Yeah.
So back at Nicholas's house, Angelique has taken care of Barnabas, and all of... I can't say God's children because it's Nicholas's house. All of the devil's children rejoice.
All of Satan's children.
All of Satan's children at Nicholas's house rejoice. And Nicholas has gone to wake up Adam to let him know that Barnabas has been taken care of. And Adam wakes from a bad dream and says that he feels weak.
Mm-hmm.
And Nicholas finds wounds on his neck and realizes that actually he has forgotten that Barnabas and Adam are connected.
Yeah.
You screwed up, Nicholas.
Yeah.
You sent Angelique after Barnabas, and you totally forgot that these two are connected.
So once Nicholas figures this out, that, the whole connection, and you made a mistake there, and he is very quick to tell Angelique to stay away from Barnabas and call on Joe instead.
Yeah, go to Joe instead.
Which Angelique obviously doesn't want. She's so not interested in Joe. She never has been.
No. And especially now that she has Barnabas, Joe is not even an afterthought.
Yeah.
Not even.
Yeah. So Joe comes to Angelique without being called by her, and she lets him have it.
Yeah.
She is cruel to him, and she tells him she doesn't want him anymore, and Angelique shows him an image on the magic mirror, and it's Nicholas and Maggie. Yeah. And it shows that Maggie is moving on and seems to be falling for Nicholas, and they even share a kiss.
Yeah, yeah. As if Joe's situation wasn't bad enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Joe has already, she has caused Joe to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie, his job, and anything resembling a life. And she threw him aside and makes Joe want to kill himself, which is exactly what he does in this moment.
He sticks a letter opener right in his gut. And,
And, Angelique panics. She panics. Oh, crap, Doesn't know what to do, so she summons Barnabas. And he comes to her and immediately starts in, because that's what they do when they get together. They start, well, I can't believe you did this to me. Well, you did this to me, and you did this to me. And he begins to say, is lament about how he used to use people this way.
Yeah. And
it didn't matter who it was as long as it was someone.
Yeah.
But Angelique wasn't interested. She was like, well, now you're my somebody, remember? And they follow orders, Mm-hmm. And so she wants Barnabas to take Joe to the woods and leave him there.
Yeah.
And let him die.
Yeah.
But Barnabas, thank God, he had some ounce of humanity and brought him to the old house instead to see Julia.
Yeah.
And Julia discovers the marks on his neck, and she's convinced that the vampire will come there.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that Barnabas is a victim yet,
So she doesn't know Angelique's the vampire.
But this was a bit of a shining moment for Julia, I think. She comments that she knows the vampire is a woman, and she suspects that it's Cassandra.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Julia.
You have no idea how spot on you are.
Yeah. I mean, it's like she already knew, but Barnabas was quick, again, to talk her down, of course. And she was like, well, I didn't expect you to laugh at me, Barnabas. It's like, again, Barnabas, I know he was the victim of a vampire, but he was treating her this way before, And Barnabas suggests that they work in shifts to keep an eye on Joe, and he takes the first shift, of course.
Yeah.
And then Joe finds the wounds on Barnabas's neck. He's like, I'll kill you. It's you. She left me for you, and threatens to kill him. So.
Next we see Adam, who is writing a note to Carolyn that he gives to Harry Johnson to give to her. And we assume that he wants to see Carolyn and he wants to take Eve to meet her. And Carolyn is happy to oblige, so they make plans.
Yeah.
And when Adam and Eve meet Carolyn, Eve is cold and refuses Carolyn's request to stay away from the window and leaves the room.
In a huff.
Yeah. And she goes to the terrace and sees Jeff Clark there, who's waiting for Vicki. And she calls to him, but she calls him Peter Bradford.
Oh my gosh.
And tells him that they had lived before in the past, and we kind of get the feeling that she was in love with him, and she says she won't rest until they are together again.
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
I have so many questions.
Yeah.
So Eve returns back to Nicholas, who scolds the crap out of her for the way that she behaved with Carolyn. I mean, she behaves so badly.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes no effort to be nice, to be cordial even.
Yeah.
And she was not.
It's not in her bones. It's not in her blood.
It's not.
Like, she's just a mean girl.
Like even to the point he's so mad at her because she what's the word? She scoffs and ridicules and anytime anytime that Adam has a problem, he comes running to Papa Nicholas and he just koalops her across the face.
Yeah.
So, I hate you. I was like, well, you're not here to like me. And
well, I hate you.
Yeah. Eve does tell Nicholas about the events of the evening with much attitude, thinking that she is indispensable to him, but he assures her, you are not. Yeah. You're not indispensable.
Yeah.
And I think even at one point, Nicholas tells her, look, Eve, I don't want to kill you.
Yeah.
Because I have this plan. But I will if I have to. I can make this happen again. If you're going to be like this, I will find someone else.
But Nicholas, what do you expect her to act like?
Honestly, it's like you brought back this evil woman back from the dead to be a life force, and you expected her to just
bow down and obey?
Even as the ghost, when he summoned her back, it was like, let me kill this woman, and he basically had to tell her more than once, no, you're not going to hurt this girl.
Yeah.
And just...
What'd you expect?
But meeting Jeff on the terrace seemed to jog her memory.
Yeah.
And she demands an answer from Nicholas about where her life force came from, and that she is convinced that she has lived before.
Yeah.
And like I said, all this time, I mean, I thought that Eve knew she was Danielle Roger when she came to life. But this comment that she makes proves that she remembers some kind of life, but can't remember exactly who she is.
Yeah.
But she remembers Peter Bradford.
Yeah.
Which is why I have so many questions, y'all. So many questions. And Nicholas thinks that there are other forces here at work because of Jeff Clark and the possibility of him being Peter Bradford. So he puts Eve in a trance and makes her go back there.
Yeah.
Like, makes her go back.
Yeah.
And so she goes back in her mind, not literally, she just goes back in her mind.
I mean, this had to be, like, right before Vicki showed up, right?
It had to have been. I'm
not right before, but obviously, I mean, there's such a gap.
There is. And I think we do learn more about it as the show progresses. But in this moment, we just see a conversation between Danielle and Peter. Peter wants to turn her into the authorities for killing Philippe Cordier, y'all. Yeah. Her lover. She killed him. And she claims she did it for Peter because she loved him and he loves her. And he gives her till the end of the night to get out of Collinsport before he turns her in. And that's all we get for now.
Yeah.
And y'all, I am intrigued. I was intrigued. this was a story with Peter Bradford we have never heard. We don't know.
Yeah.
And who is he to Danielle? How does he know her? What's their relationship? He admits to not loving her anymore.
Yeah.
So when did he love her?
Yeah. Was
Peter a player? I need some answers, girls. Come on.
No.
guys and gals, I need some answers. So after, that's all we get for now with that. So after this, Nicholas tells her about her past, and she now understands why she has such an urge to hate and kill Adam. Mm-hmm. She's ready to go after Jeff, and so she leaves. She goes to find Jeff. Yeah. And she tells him that this marriage that he's going to have to Vicki is not going to happen, and she is determined that her and Jeff are going to be together.
Yeah.
And Adam has begun to question Nicholas. He doesn't understand why Eve doesn't love him and why she's so unhappy.
Yeah.
And even though Adam has come a long way in his knowledge and his know-how of his surroundings and stuff, he's still very naive.
Yeah.
He still needs a lot of things explained to him. And he doesn't understand why Eve just doesn't love him because they're the same.
Yeah.
They were brought into the world the same way, so he feels like that should automatically be a win for him.
Yeah.
But he doesn't understand why. And Adam wants Nicholas to take them and just leave the way he said he was going to.
Yeah.
And Nicholas has made the promise of fixing Adam's face, but Adam doesn't care about that. And he says that they'll only leave, but he wants Maggie to come with them.
Yeah.
And I think that Adam genuinely cares about Eve's happiness, even though she has been absolutely horrible to him.
Yeah.
Because in Adam's mind, Eve is it for him. If Eve goes away, if Eve doesn't exist, there's no one for Adam.
Right. He's doing his best to forget about Carolyn and a relationship with her. Like, he's trying to move on.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah. And like you said, Eve is feels like his last resort with him, and it probably is. So
I agree.
So Nicholas does go to Maggie and pops the question.
He does.
Like, he just makes up a plan and just does it.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells her he will be leaving Collinsport soon and wants her to be with him. Like, he will never be returning, ever.
Yeah.
That's the way he puts it. He's like, I will never return.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I'll never be back, yeah.
And, yeah, he's like, and I want you to come with me. And
I think the plan, I mean, I know what Nicholas says, but in the grand scheme of things, I think that Nicholas's plan and the assignment he was given by Diabolos, who we will later meet, y'all, I think the plan is for him to take Adam and Eve. Maggie wasn't a part of this equation, but his plan was to take Adam and Eve back down to hell and begin this new race of serving Satan, Diabolos.
Yeah.
But he didn't factor in Maggie. He didn't factor in falling in love with her.
Yeah.
And that becomes a huge problem later on, guys. Mm-hmm. We will soon learn.
It's like Nicholas has never had human urges or feelings or temptations. Like, thus far, that's what it seems like. Like, he's like this all-powerful. Yeah. Like, nothing ever phases me until
he's on assignment, and that's what he's
his
there
angel
to do.
of death in Maggie.
Yeah.
Gets him.
I agree.
And, makes him feel human. And Angelique, we talked about this already, that Angelique was like, now you know how it feels to be human, right?
I think we find that later on. Yeah. But I think we do. I think at some point she does say something to that effect to him. And she's absolutely right.
But, Maggie, she ends up saying no because of Joe's condition. She uses that excuse, which is not really an excuse, but it is a
valid reason.
It's a good enough valid reason to stay.
And Barnabas and Julia have already told her, hey, Joe tried to kill himself.
Yeah.
And I think she's already been up to see Joe and, try to make him better. And I think she kind of made it worse. But
well, and at this point, it seems like he's going to remain suicidal.
Exactly.
Like, he doesn't seem like he's going to come out of this.
Right.
And she puts on, like, that is her main concern, and Nicholas picks up on it. So he decides to engage Harry Johnson to poison Joe and kill him and just eliminate him.
Exactly. And as strange as it seems, Harry Johnson seems to have some strong reservations about killing someone. I guess thieving and blackmail are the extent of his sleaziness. That murder is where he draws the line.
I mean, yeah.
I guess. But, oh, gosh.
I mean, Jeff's was digging bodies.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I mean,
that's as far as he'll go. But he'll dig the body, but he won't create the being with you.
It's like, you just never know about some people. You just don't know.
Oh my goodness. So Barnabas is keeping watch over Joe, but is being summoned by Angelique at the same time. And the scene is, sad.
It is. Joe wakes up and thinks that she is calling to him.
Yeah.
But really, she is calling to Barnabas.
Yeah.
And this is why we have called this Joe's downward spiral.
Yeah.
Because we are seeing Joe at rock bottom. And I'm about to cry over it. It really breaks my heart. Like, even though Joe has been a meathead, he's been the knight in shining armor type, I still found myself so sad to see him fall so low.
Yeah.
And the fact that he thought that Angelique was calling to him when actually she was calling to Barnabas, just, oh God, it broke my heart.
Yeah.
But Barnabas can't resist. He can't resist Angelique, and Harry is able to get into Joe's room and deliver the poison to his medicine bottle.
Yeah.
And we learned that Angelique wanted Barnabas to look guilty for killing Joe. She wanted that. That's why she wanted Joe. He wanted her to leave him in the woods. And now, because he disobeyed her, she wants him to administer the poison.
Yeah.
He says no, but she sinks her teeth in, so now he's got to obey.
Yeah.
And Julia awakens because she's not on shift. She's sleeping while Barnabas is on shift.
Mm-hmm.
And Harry has to find somewhere to hide, quick style. And he's able to sneak out unseen, but he finds Barnabas in the woods unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And brings Barnabas back to Collinwood, refuses any help from a doctor or Mrs. Johnson, and leaves to go back to the old house.
Mm-hmm.
And when he returns, he finds Julia, who's being very inquisitive. Where have you been?
Yeah.
It's been over an hour. Where have you been?
Yeah.
And he says the howling of the dogs made him curious to go out to investigate. And Julia, God bless her, she's so smart.
Yeah.
She where have you been? Where have you been? And after a few minutes of the back and forth with Julia and Barnabas, Julia, ever being the questioning type, he gets her to stay downstairs while he goes up to Joe and attempts to deliver the poison.
Right.
But thank goodness Julia showed up when she did. She chalks it up to tiredness, but later does an analysis of the medicine. Like, she thinks that Barnabas is just tired.
Yeah.
And didn't realize he didn't need a dose. But she checks on the medicine and realizes that there is poison in it.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes, Barnabas, I'm going to watch Joe from now on. He's like, I don't know why there's poison in this bottle.
Yeah.
And I think that you do, and you're not telling.
Yeah.
And Julia is really asking questions at this point.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to know why and how the poison got there and who's trying to kill Joe. And she does eventually let it go for a little while. Like I said, they're both tired.
Mm-hmm.
But in the morning, she goes back to Collinwood and lets Barnabas rest, but leave it to Mrs. Johnson to give her a clue. She tells Julia all about Barnabas collapsing in the woods and looking pale and weak and refusing a doctor.
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Johnson, also being the inquisitive and Budinsky type, goes down to the old house just in time to see Joe strangling Barnabas with a rope. But Barnabas refuses to let her call the police, stating that this is between Haskell and me.
Yeah.
This scene here is where Roger is offering Elizabeth like an olive branch.
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to help her. So they go into the graveyard at Liz's request. Let's take a look at the mausoleum. Maybe you don't even need to build a new one. Let's look at the one that's there.
Yeah.
And they're overlooking the cemetery and the mausoleum so that Liz can get a better picture for her own tomb. And they find Joe in the mausoleum.
Yeah.
And they bring him back to Collinwood. And Mrs. Johnson, she blurts out that Joe is trying to kill Barnabas.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe comes to long enough to say that he has to kill Barnabas before he kills him. And Roger makes the call to the police.
We didn't need the police involved.
Nope, but they're involved now.
So when they come, they question Mrs. Johnson and Julia. And they ask about the poisoned medicine. And Julia states that she has no idea how the medicine got poisoned. She goes down to get the tainted medicine and fights with Barnabas about examining him and about talking to the police. And he doesn't want Joe to talk either. We know, of course, that he's protecting the vampire. But Julia doesn't understand. But I think she's highly suspicious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah.
And she even comes out and asks, why are you protecting the vampire? Just straight up.
Yeah.
But Barnabas claims he's doing no such thing.
Yeah.
Of course.
I know that there is no rationality when it comes to being the victim of a vampire.
Yeah.
But didn't Barnabas realize that Julia was getting close with all of the events that are happening?
Yeah.
She already knew that Joe was a victim. Did he really think that she wouldn't figure it out?
Right.
I mean, honestly.
I mean, I get you still really can't say it because you're under the vampire's power. Like, you can't just straight up be like, oh, it's Angelique.
Yeah.
I get that power over him. I get that. But why are you still trying to lie to Julia?
Yeah. You can't lie to this woman.
After all you've been through up to this point.
No. I mean, all that they've been through, all that Julia has done for him, and all that they have been through together, and all of the events that have taken place, why on God's green earth did Barnabas think that he could lie to her?
Yeah.
And keep this from her?
Yeah. Even we see, from the past, Ben Stokes, he did everything he could to tell Barnabas
about Angelique.
Yeah, and finally he was able to at least scribble the first letter of her name.
Yeah.
To go against her power. Like, you tried hard enough, Barnabas. You could have gone against her power. Exactly.
So I mean, I've never been the victim of a vampire, and I don't plan to be, so I can't really put myself in that situation. But I can't rationalize with it. Yeah. I can't. So
here again, Julia gets another clue. While Barnabas is being questioned by the sheriff on what happened between he and Joe, he abruptly cuts the conversation short because Angelique is calling to him. Mm. And the sheriff finds Julia in the woods and relays Barnabas' weirdness to her. Yeah. Soon, she gets her proof. She walks into the old house and sees Barnabas, who is on the brink of passing out. When he does, she inspects his neck and sees the wounds and knows that what she has suspected is true. Yep. And
she found out.
Yeah.
It did not take very long.
Yeah. And she calls on Willie, and they move him to Maggie's cell in the basement to keep him safe.
And this was another scene that just, it got me in the feels. Like, Julia and Willie are trying to comfort Barnabas. They have both been through this. Both Julia and Willie have been the victim of a vampire. Both with different vampires. Yeah. Willie with Barnabas and Julia with Tom. Yeah. With Tom Jennings. And they both know what he's going through, but they can't bring him any comfort at all. Yeah. But I do think that they are the best people to help him get through it. They understand, and they're both insanely devoted to Barnabas. Yeah. And even though Barnabas is no longer a vampire, Willie is still very devoted to him. Yeah. And speaking of Willie, poor Willie, Barnabas makes an escape by smashing him over the head with a vase, and escapes out the tunnel the same way that Maggie took to Widow's Hill.
5-6, count the bricks.
Yes, 5-6, count the bricks.
But yeah, like, and again, I think I mentioned it before, but those catacombs under the friggin' old house are like some of my favorite. We talked about that with Jewel, the sets of Dark Shadows. Yes. But oh my god, those catacombs are so cool. And they like take you from below Widow's Hill at the bottom of Widow's Hill. They're so cool.
I don't know how many of you know this. I'm going to pause just for a moment, but at this whole Remembrance Weekend, they are setting up this tour of the grounds of Collinwood that they used for the 1991 series. That I think we're going to skip just because I want to go inside, y'all, and we're not able to go inside. So I'm going to take time and do other things. But I think that would be so cool to be able to see the sets and see the places that they use for these catacombs and see the house. And, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what happens when you get involved, I guess. So Julia finds Willie and hears the dogs howling. And this is an end of an episode. And Barnabas, with the audible thinking, just, I'm so sorry. He was like, I said you were my friend, but the time for friends has passed. He's like, I'm no longer able to have any friends. And if that isn't being the victim of a vampire in a nutshell, I don't know what is. Yeah. I just don't.
Yeah. So we're back at Collinwood after that. And Jeff is trying to push up the wedding to Vicki, and she, of course, doesn't understand why. Mm-hmm. And she does agree because she loves him, and Eve can be seen peering out the window like a screen, watching them. Yeah. And Jeff promises that he will do everything he can to keep Vicki happy.
He's been given a second chance, and Jeff ain't gonna friggin' blow it this time.
Yeah.
And I think he's rattled because of Eve and calling him Peter Bradford.
Of course,
and I think that's a lot of the reason why he wants to move.
And before all that, he's been dealing with like flashes of Peter, anyways, that he's been trying to figure out or ignore, or
that he's been kind of been able just to stave off because there's no sustenance to them, there's no meat to them, there's no validity in them that he knows of. Right. But now that Eve is here calling him Peter Bradford, when he's finally convinced Vicki that he is Jeff Clark and she is marrying Jeff Clark for Jeff Clark, not for Peter Bradford. Yeah. And so this kind of Eve showing up and doing this has kind of just thrown a wrench into all of this and has confused Jeff all over again. And Jeff retreats to the terrace after he has this conversation with Vicki, and Eve is there waiting for him and calls to him again as Peter Bradford. And she starts in again, and he tries to send her away and refuses to believe that he is Peter. Yeah. But she kisses him, and he doesn't really fight back. Yeah. And wrong moment, wrong time, Roger catches them, and Eve runs off. And Roger is so calm and matter-of-fact and collected about it, says that Jeff doesn't have an explanation, and Roger says, I don't need one. He's like, it's pretty obvious what happened. Yeah. And says that it's good that this mistake has happened before it's too late. Yeah. And he doesn't understand that if Roger goes to Vicki and says that this woman mistook Jeff for Peter Bradford, it's going to cause a whole new storm of suck for her and everyone. Yeah. And because if Jeff allows Roger to go to Vicki, and because Jeff's explanation says this woman mistook me for Peter Bradford. Yeah. And this is another moment where Roger sticks up for Vicki. Yes, it is. Treating her like a daughter or a niece like he does with Carolyn. Exactly. Yeah. But Roger doesn't understand, because Roger doesn't believe in all this stuff, that if he goes to Vicki and says this woman mistook him for Peter Bradford, that's going to open up a whole new world of hurt for Vicki and for Jeff, and oh my gosh. Yeah. He just doesn't understand, and Jeff is trying to get him to understand. Yeah.
Roger wants to tell Vicki immediately, and he and Jeff argue about it in her vicinity. Stupid.
It was stupid, because, I mean, they could have argued about it outside. Now Jeff and Roger have to come up with something to tell this girl, even if it isn't the truth. Yeah.
And now she has to know what they're arguing about. And Jeff finally gives up and lets Roger tell her. But just as he's about to tell her about what he saw, he changes his mind and tells her that Barnabas is missing, and he didn't want her to be upset about it. And he warns Jeff that he better not see or hear anything else like he just saw, or he will go straight to Vicki.
He's like, you listen, Clark, and you listen good.
Right.
I mean, and that was so fatherly of him, you know? It's like, you hurt her, I'm coming after you,
And he even says, like, Vicki is one of the few people in this world that I find worth caring about.
Which is so
profound for Roger.
It is profound for Roger. And I was going to say, the Roger up till now, it was kind of uncharacteristic of him. So to see Roger care like that, it makes Roger human. And it made me happy.
Yeah. And later on, Roger has a dream about their wedding. Yeah. Roger has a dream about it, so it's not, he doesn't seem like the kind of person that he lets things bother him for too long. Right. He just lets them slide off. Right. But obviously, this was bothering him, and he has a dream about it.
Which proves his feelings for Vicki, y'all.
Yeah. And he gives Vicki away, and when he lifts her veil, there's a skull looking back at him, and he takes that as a sign that if Vicki marries Jeff, she will die, or something bad's going to happen, you know.
And what is even more surprising is that he does tell Vicki about this dream and tries to talk her out of marrying him because of this dream. And Vicki's like, are you kidding me, Roger? You, of all people, are putting this much stock into a dream? And it just, the way that she is talking to Roger, it tells of their relationship and how it has matured. Yeah. Vicki is employed by the Collinses, but as of late, she doesn't seem to be doing much teaching so much as she's just a member of the family now. Yeah. The dynamic has changed so much since the show started. Like, Vicki is just, she's a member of the family.
Even Liz, at some point, is like, you're thinking of leaving? Like, Vicki, your family, what are we going to do without you?
Right, exactly.
What would we do without you?
Exactly. Like, and she was like, I'm not going far, I'm just getting married, and it just, I don't know, it was really nice to see that she was employed by the Collinses when she first came. Now, more or less, she is a Collins. Yeah. And if things had gone the way that it should, she definitely is a Collins. We all know this. We all know this story. So Julia enters the room and tells Roger that she's worried about Barnabas. And without telling him that he's the victim of a vampire, she tells him how he's been reacting and how he's now missing. Yeah. And we see that Angelique has moved Barnabas to a cave near the cliff, probably near Widow's Hill. And Barnabas is weak. He's very near death. Yeah. And Angelique thinks that she can keep him there until she's ready to turn him into a vampire. Yeah. And Barnabas has just enough strength to ask, after all these years of hating me, you still want that? And here we are again. Another tirade about how Angelique, she goes on about no matter what she is, how she's been. She's still a woman, and she still loves Barnabas, and she still talks about that night in Martinique.
Yeah.
And she seems to go back and forth with whether or not she hates Barnabas or loves him. But I guess in this moment she loves him and wants to turn him into a vampire so that they can finally be together. Like, how long has she held on to Martinique?
Yeah.
And I wish we knew specifically what happened while they were there.
Yeah.
Like, we hear little stories here and there, but what happened?
Yeah.
What did Barnabas do? What did he say to her that made her this fatal attraction version?
I'm just going to say it, guys. I don't think it was all the sex.
It couldn't.
I don't think it was all sex.
I don't think so. There's something.
I'm sorry, but the innuendos are there. Like, we're all adults here.
It is. We all know that's what it's about. Even Lara Parker, God rest her soul, on one of her interviews said, all of this is sexual. All of it is.
Yeah.
You know? But I think you're right. It couldn't have just been all the sex.
Like, he had to have said something or made some kind of promise or, like, something that, like, made her feel like their souls were bound together.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they were meant for each other and nobody else. Like something was said.
Something was said. Something was done. And we don't know. Nobody says. But Angelique is fully convinced that nothing on hell or on earth is going to stop them from being together.
I mean, I think it's one of the best untold stories here. Like,
I agree.
Of the show.
It is one of the best untold stories. And
yeah.
Mark B. Perry, if you're out there listening and you're putting this together, I'd love to see that in the new show.
Yeah.
So once she's gone, once Angelique is gone, Barnabas does find the strength to leave and makes it into the woods. I mean, barely, but he does it.
Yeah.
And he realized now he's not strong enough to make it anywhere except to lie right there in the woods.
Yeah.
So he calls to Vicki. He feels like Vicki is the only one he can call to because Angelique would suspect Julia, Angelique would suspect Barnabas, and she would probably suspect Professor Stokes too, because of all the help that Barnabas got from Stokes in the Dream Curse and with Nicholas and all that. So Vicki, he decides that Vicki is the only one, and somehow she hears him. She hears him calling to her. Mm-hmm. And he begs her, she does find him, miraculously, she finds him. Yeah. And he begs her to hide him where nobody can find him. And she takes him to the west wing of Collinwood where Adam stayed. Like he slept in his bed. Mm-hmm. And he asked her to bring him across for protection. Yeah. And Vicki, profoundly confused, does what she is asked. You know, does what she's told. So from here, we go to the hospital where Joe is. Joe has gone to the hospital. And he is hoping that Angelique comes to him this night. Yeah. Still hoping. And Julia's there and to see him and begs him to tell her who the vampire is, knowing good and well. And he does remind her how impossible it is for the victim to tell who the vampire is. So Julia decides that it is time to have a showdown with Nicholas Blair.
Yeah.
And that's what she does. She goes directly to Nicholas and levels with him. Mm-hmm. She says, look, I know you're responsible for the creation of Adam's mate and that you're responsible for Barnabas being a victim of a vampire. Mm-hmm. She levels with him. Mm-hmm. And he, of course, denies it all, but then begins to act concerned when Julia tells him that Barnabas has disappeared and if he isn't found, he's going to die.
Yeah. And you don't want that to happen, do you?
Right. And he doesn't admit to it. He doesn't admit that he's behind it all. Yeah. But Julia reminds him that if Barnabas dies, well, Adam's going to die too. Yeah.
And his whole plan
is foiled completely. And Julia can tell that she's upset him. Mm-hmm. He kicks her out.
That's all she really needed.
Yeah.
She really didn't even admit an admission, excuse me.
Nicholas kicks her out, but not before she tells him that it would be to both of their advantages to find him. And he tells her that he admires her without really telling her why, but he ends up with saying, you know what I mean. And I'm like, okay, go ahead, Nicholas.
He's another one of those, I can't help it. I just love him.
I love him too.
I love Nicholas Blair.
I hate all his dastardliness and his evilness, but God, how can you not love him?
It has nothing to do with his handsome friggin' looks, guys. It's not that.
I mean, he is that, but it has nothing to do with that.
I don't know.
Nicholas is one of them devilishly handsome guys, but that literally has nothing to do.
But his attitude is devilishly handsome.
Yeah.
His attitude is, too. I don't know.
And Humbert Allen Ostrato, I mean, how can you cast a more perfect person? Yeah. I mean, he did the dang thing, man.
He can look and act sinister, but at the same time, like, devilishly charming.
Like he's another one of those people. How Laura Parker got the question, "Are you actually into witchcraft? Are you actually into this?" I could ask the same question.
You sure fooled me.
Yeah, like I could literally ask the same question of Humbert Allen Ostrato.
Yeah,
I really could.
But again, they said this on the Master of Dark Shadows documentary about Dan Curtis. Mm-hmm. That I want to say maybe David Selby said it, but the thing was that all these actors were just as eccentric as the characters they were playing. And that really helped. Yeah. Like, and it's obvious. Like,
it totally is.
I loved it. That's what made it work so well, this whole show, is the actors being as eccentric as the characters they were playing. And it's so true. But
And this scene coming up, y'all, now that Julia has said her piece, Nicholas knows that Angelique has been a very bad girl. Mm-hmm. A very bad girl. Mm-hmm. She rises from her coffin and attempts to be cordial with Nicholas. Yeah. And he will not say a word to her. He's sitting on that couch of his with a little flower, just kind of whatever, biding his time, I think. And she asks what's wrong, and he says, "Would you really like an answer?" And she goes, yes, I would. And he goes, "Okay, I'll give you one." And then comes up to her and what a pow across the face.
What a pow.
So hard that she falls, y'all. She falls to the ground. I was watching this with my kids. He goes, "Oh, he beats women too?" And I was like, you guys, I do not validate. I do not validate that. I do not support that. I am fervently against it. But y'all, Angelique deserved it.
She asked for it. Let's put it that way. She asked for it.
He demands to know where Barnabas is, and tells her to go and get him, take him back to the old house, and leave him there, and stay your butt away from him. And Julia's been hanging out. She's been hanging back in the woods, right outside Nicholas's house, and waits for him to leave, because she's going to go in there and find this vampire, or find Barnabas, or both, whatever it is. Yeah. But instead, he leaves, and then Angelique leaves right behind him.
Yeah, and she goes, "Oh my God.
It's Angelique Collins." But she goes in anyway. She goes into the house anyway and finds Adam suffering the way that Barnabas is. Yeah. And Adam says she doesn't need to search the house because Barnabas isn't there, and she needs to help Barnabas and make them both well. Like, he's begging her, "I'm telling you right now, he's not here. Please just go and find him so we can both be well." Yeah. And then he tells her to stay out of that house. Mm-hmm. And when Adam says this, I don't think he's telling her, "Get away from me. Just stay away from me." I don't think he's angry or hates her. I think he fears for her safety. I think it was a warning. Yeah. Stay out of this house. Yeah. Angelique is calling to Barnabas, and he doesn't respond. He, of course, has the cross for protection. Mm-hmm. And she finds this out via the magic mirror on the wall, and then sends Adam after him, and she manipulates him and tells him that Barnabas will kill Eve. That's his plan. Yeah. And so Adam goes after Barnabas and destroys the cross. And Vicki goes and gets Julia, has no idea that Barnabas has gone. Yeah. Like, Barnabas told her, "Do not contact Julia, do not do this," but she does anyway. And they get there and it's too late. Barnabas is already gone.
Angelique talks about how she's not afraid of Nicholas anymore. She says that he is becoming more and more like a mortal man, and no mortal man can destroy her plans. Mm-hmm. And she plans to turn him this night, and she bites him one last time and leaves him in the woods as the rooster crows, and this is kind of Julia's dream come to life. Yes. Like Barnabas stumbling through the woods, almost dead. Yes. So the race is on to find Barnabas, basically. Yeah. And Julia and Willie are searching for him while Nicholas is caring for Adam, who is on death's door as well. Mm. He goes to his magic mirror to find out where Barnabas is, which is now missing.
Yeah, the mirror's missing.
Willie decides that if they destroy her, then Barnabas will recover immediately. So Julia sends Willie to get the goods, and she takes some plasma from the lab and heads to Nicholas's to help Adam. Yeah. And she just straight up demands to know where the coffin is and produces the wooden stake. And, of course, he still won't tell her. But she helps Adam anyway for the time being. And she urges Nicholas to destroy Angelique and leaves the stake with him. Mm-hmm. And we see Barnabas in the woods, and he has just enough strength to call for help. And luckily, Willie was nearby searching and finds him. And Julia arranges for him to go to Wincliffe to keep him safe from Angelique.
Yeah. So they finally find him. Julia sends him away to Wincliffe, and that's where he stays.
Yeah.
He stays there for a while.
Yeah.
So that's what we'll leave you with for tonight. Next time, y'all, I actually can't wait to talk about the next episode. We have decided to call it "Who in the World is Jeff Clark?"
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we finally get some answers about Jeff Clark / Peter Bradford.
Yeah.
And so we are going to save that all for next time. Just as a reminder, guys, we just, again, want to say thank you so much for listening, for giving us your time, for being fans of this show, and for all your comments and the comments that we keep continuing to get. I mean, it's just...
It just makes it more fun, and it makes us
does.
want to do this even more.
Yeah.
And to hear you guys' interactions and comments about it all, like,
and I would personally, I'd like to urge you just to check out the other podcasts that are out there to do with Dark Shadows. There are a few, guys, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
They really are. Resident of Collinwood, shout out to Mr. Joel T. Sains. We miss you.
Yeah.
We miss you.
Yeah, we'll be there soon.
Yes. And Penny Dreadful over at Terror at Collinwood, excellent podcast. There's a new-ish one that's kind of new on the scene called Collinsport After Dark.
Mr. Alan Galland.
Yes, we just met him at the Dark Shadows podcast summit, and y'all check out his podcast. It's awesome.
Yeah.
He's one of the original watchers, which I think is excellent. You know? So he's got a lot of insight as well. And Rachel Pulliam also has a podcast called Dark Paradise. It's kind of a crossover between Dark Shadows and Strange Paradise. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah. She's very talented. Go check her out.
Yeah.
And if I missed anybody, I'm really sorry. I know that there's a new one that came out called Dark Shad Bros. Mm-hmm. So go and check that one out as well. That's amazing.
And if you're not reading the Dark Shadows daybooks, read them.
Yes. What are you doing with your life?
Mr. Patrick McRae.
But you guys always reach out to us. We might be a little delayed, but we do try to be as responsive as we possibly can be. We are on Facebook. We're on X, which is formerly known as Twitter. We're on YouTube. Leave us some comments, y'all.
We've got a fresh new page on Instagram. And
don't forget about the Buy Me a Coffee / Between the Shadows if you feel like giving. Until next time, guys, remember to keep it between us and the shadows. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Regardless of what I am, what I have been, I am still a woman, Barnabas. I think and feel like a woman. I've hated the things you've done, but I have never hated you yourself. How could I? The memory of a night in Martinique has never left my mind. You came to me that night, and I was so full of love for you. How else could I have given so much of myself to you? I knew then that no power in the universe could prevent us from one day keeping the pledge that we made that night. You've been listening to Between the Shadows, a Dark Shadows podcast. All original Dark Shadows music, video clips, images, and media are not owned by Between the Shadows and is the sole property of Dan Curtis Productions and is only used to promote Dark Shadows and should not be distributed, copied, or reproduced.